Maybe you've thought about this at least once in your life. You suddenly froze in the middle of the ordinary day, or lying in bed at night and thought, who am I, really? Why do I exist when before I didn't? Why do I see the world through my own eyes and nobody else's? And after a few attempts to figure it out, you gave up. Because it's impossible. The thought drifted away. Life moved on, and you never came back to it. Pause for a second and catch this feeling. I am me, and nobody else. Does that scare you or fascinate you? This is what this video is about. Scientists and philosophers call it the hardest problem, the phenomenon of self-awareness. We'll look at different theories today, but I'll be honest with you up front. There's no answer. What there is though is something more interesting than an answer. Every morning something incredible happens and we completely ignore it. You open your eyes, and at some point, in a fraction of a second, you become yourself again. A moment ago, there was nothing. Deep dreamless sleep, and there's no you in there. No experience, no point of view, just nothing. And then there is. The room is back, the morning is back, thoughts start flowing again, and you are back. The same one who was here yesterday. How does that happen? Where does this I come from? Descartes in the 17th century decided to tear everything down and start over. He asked, is there anything I absolutely cannot doubt? It turned out almost everything can be doubted. Senses deceive. Memories can be false. The whole world could be theoretically be an illusion. But there's one thing that can't be doubted. The very fact that you are doubting. I think, therefore I am. The only thing that's absolutely certain is that right now there's something that's experiencing. There's a subject. There's an observer. This one. The one listening right now. Okay, there's an I. But what is it? Religion says it's the soul, or you are the soul. Immortal, unique, given by God. But sorry, that's not an answer. It's just a different name for the same question. We ask, what is I? The answer is, it's your soul. And what's a soul? It's your I. We went in a circle. We got nowhere. There's another theory, beautiful but just as incomplete. That I is a part of God, that all people are parts of one big consciousness that constantly thinks through us, that we are like drops of an ocean that believe they are separate. Poetic. But if we are part of one I, then what is my I inside all of that? The question didn't go anywhere. It just got bigger. Science answers questions about the body, about how things works. Here's a neuron, here's a synapse, here's an electrochemical signal. That explains the mechanism, but it doesn't explain the main thing. Why does this mechanism feel like something? Why does processing information come with experience? This is exactly what philosopher Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness in 1995. He drew a line between two kinds of problems. The easy problems, and he didn't mean simple, just solvable, are everything that can be explained through mechanisms. How the brain processes information, how it reacts to stimuli, how it distinguishes colors, stores memories, reports pain, controls behavior. These are questions about functions and structures. Neuroscience, cognitive science, even AI, they can tackle this. They are making progress. Then there's the hard problem. And it's a different beast entirely. Why do any of these processes come with subjective experience at all? Why is there something it feels like to see red rather than just brain registering a 700 nm wavelength in silence? Why is there something it feels like to be in pain rather than just a damage signal firing with no sensation attached? Chalmers' point was simple and devastating. You could explain every single mechanism in the brain perfectly, every neuron, every circuit, every process, and still have explained nothing about why any of it feels like anything. Neither science nor religion answers this. That's a little unsettling. Here's the good news. If you think about this long enough, there are two possible outcomes. First, you lose your mind. Second, you get a very clear feeling that you are about to understand, that the answer is right there, that one more second and everything will click. But unfortunately, that about to just stays at about to, because the brain simply doesn't have enough power to reach the understanding. It's not a question of intelligence. It's just something that isn't available to understand, like the infinity of the universe. We are told the universe is infinite, just as a fact, but the brain can't accept the existence of something with no beginning and no end. It keeps looking for the wall, but then, what's beyond the wall? There must be something, and that something also had to end somewhere, and beyond that ending, something again. So the brain never actually accepts infinity as infinity, but it accepts something else, an infinite chain of endings. An endless series of, and what's beyond that, it can't hold this concept of the true infinity, but it keeps producing it anyway, one wall at a time. And here's the question that breaks everything open, even if the universe ends. Where is it located? It has to be somewhere, right? That's what the mind insists. So the brain escapes infinity through endings, and the infinity sneaks back in through the door it just closed. That's the problem. Maybe the right place to start is actually trying to imagine infinity and break your brain open in a good way. A brain that's been broken open like that can start thinking about what I is without having a crisis, because I and infinity are the same kind of mystery, things that obviously exist and yet fundamentally don't fit inside normal understanding. When I was in school, I was talking to a classmate, and I told her completely seriously, I think I'm actually God. And I explained why. I described my experience of the world from the first person. The fact that for me, only what I see, feel, and experience exists. That the whole world in my universe, and I am the only subject in it. I thought I was the only one who felt that way. She paused and said, actually, I'm God. And she confirmed that she perceived the world the exact same way. That she was also the only subject in her universe, that for her too, the whole world exists only through her experience. That's when I understood something important. Every person around you lives in their own universe, where they are the subject. Every person is a separate center of the world, a separate point of view from which everything is observed. But they didn't change the fact that in my universe, I'm the only subject. Do you see what I mean? No matter how many of us there are, 1 billion, 8 billion, each of us experience the world as if they're the only one, just because subjectivity, by definition, is always singular. That's the loneliest and the most universal thing about us at the same time. We tend to think of I as something concrete, the brain, personality, memories. But the observer itself, where is it? Would these philosophers ask this question for 2,500 years? Their answer was radical. It doesn't exist. I is an illusion, a stream of experiences that mistakes itself for a unified whole. Imagine a river. You look at it and say, same river as yesterday, but the water is different. The banks have shifted slightly. What makes it the same river? Only the continuity of the flow, nothing more. Nietzsche went even further. He said, I is a grammatical fiction. We say I think as if there is a separate I that does the thinking. But that's like saying lighting flashes, as if lighting exists separately from the flashing. Maybe there's no I that thinks. There's just thinking. Neuroscience almost confirms this. When you make a decision, say to raise your hand, the brain activity linked to that movement starts seconds before you consciously become aware of your intention. The brain already decided, and the I finds out later and thinks it was its own idea. Maybe I isn't the source of action. Maybe it's just the audience. The philosopher Thomas Metzinger proposed a bold answer. He said, I is a phenomenal self-model, a transparent model of itself that the brain builds. And because it's transparent, we don't see it as a model. We look right through it and identify with it. You're not the I, you're a brain that builds such a convincing model of I. It's like a very realistic dream. Inside the dream, everything is real. And you, until you wake up, don't know you are dreaming. But here's the question. What does it even mean to wake up from I? And most importantly, who wakes up? That's where the whole theory falls apart. If the brain creates a phantom I, who's watching it? If I is a fiction, it's a fiction that's aware of itself. But a fiction can't be aware of itself. This doesn't really work. You can describe I from the outside, call it a model, an illusion, a process, a stream. But someone is doing that describing. And that someone is I again. It's like trying to bite your own teeth. The tool of analysis and the object of analysis are the same thing. No matter how many times we describe this I, no matter how many times we try to interpret it or question whether it exists, I remain myself. The observer doesn't go anywhere, it just watches the theory that says it doesn't exist, and the problem goes even deeper than it seems. The philosopher Thomas Nagel asked a simple question back in 1974. What is it like to be a bat? We know everything about bats, their psychology, their neurons, their echolocation. We can describe the whole mechanism in perfect detail. But there's the thing, no matter how much we know about a bat's brain, we have absolutely no idea what it's like to be a bat, what it actually feels like from the inside to experience the world through echolocation. That sensation is completely alien to us, and no amount of objective scientific data will ever get us there. Why? Because experience is always tied to a point of view. Science gives us a third-person description, precise, measurable, objective, but consciousness is always first-person. It's always from somewhere, and that somewhere can be transferred. Nagel wasn't saying science is wrong. He was saying we simply don't have the conceptual tools yet to bridge the gap between the objective description of the thing and what it's actually like to be that thing. And that gap, that's exactly where I lives. You can describe me from the outside, but what it's like to be me right now, that will always stay on this side of the glass. They say you can't experience what you can imagine. Try to imagine that you don't exist. You can't, right? There's always an observer left. The one who's contemplating the idea of their own absence, who's watching the darkness, who's thinking, here I am, imagining my own non-existence. Consciousness doesn't stop. It keeps going even then. It tries to imagine its own disappearance. You have probably imagined your own death at some point. And here's what's funny. You almost certainly imagined it from the outside. You watched it. You saw yourself lying there. You saw people around you. But imagining that you are experiencing it, that's impossible. Because in the moment you experience it, you are already gone. So there's nobody left to experience it. That's the main paradox. If you don't exist, who's watching? And here's another one, even stranger. Did the world exist before you were born? Science says yes. History, archaeology, there were people, countries, events, billions of years before you. But did any of that exist for you? No. For you, there was nothing. Absolute zero. So, as the only observer in your world, you have every right to question whether the world existed before you appeared in it. The world began with you. At least your world did. I think consciousness is primary and unchanging. More than that, it's eternal. We won't talk here about reincarnation or things like that. Those don't explain the phenomenon of self-awareness either. Eternity is also something impossible to imagine. I know you tried, at least once, to imagine endless time. And the brain stops the same way it stops in front of infinite space. But here's what's interesting. This I actually believes it will never disappear. That's exactly why we live as if we'll never die. We save money, build houses, plan 20 years ahead. Yes, the thought that everything will end someday is there, but it stays in the background, like an unpleasant fact you know about but don't really feel. Why? Maybe because I genuinely doesn't believe in its own ending. Not at the level of reason, at the level of something deeper. Consciousness stubbornly believes in its own continuation, even when you try to reason your way into accepting that it's impossible. Everyone dies. They say, sure, nobody has come back to describe what's on the other side. So either there's nothing there, or coming back is impossible, or maybe it's just too far away to bother. But consciousness keeps believing anyway. And maybe that's not a mistake. Maybe that's knowledge, just a different kind. Descartes said, I is the only certainty. Kant said, I is the condition for any experience to be possible. Fichte said, I creates itself through the very act of being aware. Hegel said, I only comes into being through another person. Nietzsche said, I is an illusion, a convenient fiction. Metzinger said, I is a transparent model that brain mistook for reality. They're all right and they are all wrong, because every answer is an answer from the inside, an answer that I gives about itself. It's like trying to see your own gaze, not a reflection in a mirror, but the actual act of looking in the moment it's happening. But no matter how much the answer slips away, one thing stays, steady, undeniable, the sense that I exists. Not in this body, not in these thoughts, but in something more fundamental, perhaps as some kind of energy, perhaps eternally, not necessarily in the form it has right now. And maybe that feeling is the only real answer, not a concept, not a theory, just this. Here it is, right now, watching this video. We started with one question. Who is watching this video? There's no answer. All these are too many answers. Or the question itself matters more than any answer. If you ever said to this, write in the comments. Maybe someone out there knows the answer but stays quiet. And honestly, that's probably the right call. Nobody would understand them anyway. Probably. It's all for now, bye. We know everything about buts.